Guys, once again we are back with some backstory lessons that we did with Demon Slayer characters months ago. This time we have something even more interesting and exciting for you guys, and trust me when we say that. No guys, we are not going to talk about Goblin Slayer and its intense content in this video or how the isekai genre is milking out from the slavery topic itself. Let's get serious about it for a moment, please. So let's talk about Kenjaku, the guy who took over Gito's body. Who exactly is this guy who switches bodies faster than a chameleon changes colors? Besides being very old and a worse father than Toji was to Megumi, there's a lot to learn about Kenjaku's story. Kenjaku's bad deeds started around the Meiji era, which is like 1868 to 1912. But get this, he's actually over 1,000 years old. That's why he knows Tenjin Usui, who's immortal, so well. About 400 years ago, Kenjaku was in some random guy's body, and he used that to make binding vows with ancient sorcerers. He also convinced an old dude named Hajime Kashimo to become a cursed object so he could come back later and fight Sukuna to prove who's the strongest. But wait, there's more. For centuries, Kenjaku's been dealing with these annoying Six Eyes and Star Plasma vessels who keep messing up his plans. Even when he takes them out, new vessels and Six Eyes users keep popping up. So Kenjaku focuses on finding other ways to deal with them. Toji unexpectedly helped Kenjaku a lot. He killed a vessel on the day of the merger and caused a rift between Gojo, who owns the Six Eyes, and his friend Gito, who's a curse manipulation user. Let's rewind about 150 years before the series started. Kenjaku took over Noritoshi Kamo's body. Kamo already had a temple, so it was an easy choice for Kenjaku to use it for his creepy experiments with blood manipulation. He locked up a woman there who could have cursed children and mixed her blood with his own to make hybrid babies. Originally, she went there seeking protection, but things went downhill fast. Kenjaku made her have 9 abortions, creating what he called death-painting wombs. You know those two brothers, Iso and Kechizu, who fought Yuji and Nobara? Well, they're technically related to Kenjaku, and I'll explain how later. The other 7 children were named Naranso, Shouso, Tanso, Sanso, Kutsuso, Shoso, and Choso, who becomes important later on. Kenjaku's twisted actions earned Kamo the title of the most evil sorcerer in history. It probably didn't help the family's reputation much either. Kenjaku was mainly curious about what these hybrid entities would become, and he was pretty full of himself, making himself the third parent to these kids. Now, how does Kenjaku keep jumping between bodies like this? Well, it's all about the stitches. He basically does brain surgery to take over bodies and use them as his new form, with his brain as the control center. He also gets their curse technique or whatever abilities the previous body had, making the transition seamless. Not even Gojo's prized Six Eyes could see through this nasty technique. After disappearing for a while, Kenjaku found more subjects to experiment on, this time involving Yuji's mother Kaori. He took over her body, despite Yuji's grandfather, Wasuke Todori, warning Yuji's father Jin about the danger of that woman. Eventually, Yuji was left alone. It's not clear what Kenjaku did with their bodies, but we can assume they both died. Kenjaku's involvement in Yuji's creation also explains why Yuji, even before learning about cursed energy, was so physically gifted and athletic. Kenjaku helped birth Yuji, either literally or through his blood, making Yuji a sibling to the cursed wombs he unknowingly fought and killed. Perhaps that's why Yuji felt bad when he saw them crying. As if that wasn't enough, Kenjaku had a cursed finger planted in Junpei's home to trigger his curse technique through negative emotions. He might not have meant for the young man to be killed by Mahito, but he didn't care either. Anything to further his plans and test things out. Around this time, Kenjaku likely laid the foundations for spreading cursed energy to non-jujutsu users in hopes of creating more of them. Many weren't compatible with this process, like Megumi's sister Tsumiki, who fell into a coma. Of course, there was a solution to that, but it required some time to be resolved. Kenjaku is nothing if not patient. But was Megumi's sister chosen simply because of bad luck, or because of Megumi's importance in Sukuna's return due to his 10 Shadows technique? It's tricky to say for sure, but Kenjaku probably figured he might need Megumi's shadows against Gojo to take down the combination of Limitless and Six Eyes. In 2018, Suguru Gito returns from the dead, not with a useful technique like spirit manipulation, but his presence was too valuable for Kenjaku to pass up. Since Gojo was too attached to his deceased best friend to completely destroy his body, Kenjaku saw an opportunity. He made temporary allies of special-grade curses like Mahito, Jogo, Hanami, and Dagon, all for a bigger research project he's been working on. They all had a common thread in Gojo, so they agreed to work together. But before they could proceed, they needed to acquire the prison realm and see how powerful Sukuna was now. Kenjaku suggested sealing Gojo as the only way to defeat him, carefully staying out of sight from any Jujutsu sorcerers who could recognize his body. He avoided fighting anyone to prevent leaving traces behind that Gojo could pick up on. With a cursed finger planted at Junpei's house and returned to Jujutsu High, Kenjaku knew where to find the fingers they stored there. Yes, he put a tracker on it, but he couldn't go himself to retrieve it without being seen. Later, 3 of the cursed wombs Kenjaku created are stolen by Mahito. The cursed hybrids are given bodies and sent to retrieve more of Sukuna's fingers to keep him on Kenjaku's side. Choso is left behind, but surprisingly, he doesn't even sense his creator's presence in Guido's body, which is rather unusual. On October 31st, for the prison realm to work, it needed 20 minutes of preparation and a full minute to seal the victim. Thanks to those working with him, Kenjaku set everything up in Shibuya. Using the body he was in, he neutralized Gojo, draining his mind thoroughly, similar to what Toji did in the past. Gojo's strong attachment to Guido made him stunned when he saw his friend back from the dead, ensuring he couldn't escape and got locked inside the prison realm. But not everything went according to Kenjaku's plan. He missed out on absorbing Jogo because Sukuna killed him, but he did capture Mahito. Using the cursed energy he spread years ago, Kenjaku transformed incompatible bodies into beings capable of wielding cursed techniques or turned them into proper vessels like Yuji. Even a combination of Jujutsu students and Todu's teacher Yuki couldn't take Kenjaku down before he unleashed transfiguration on the marked people. Fortunately, Kenjaku's use of idol transfiguration was a one-time deal, as he absorbed Mahito and expended him with an Uzumaki attack. But to be fair, Mahito was planning to attack Kenjaku anyway. Afterward, Kenjaku left with another ancient sorcerer named Urim, preparing his next big moves, leading us to the culling game. The culling game is one of the final steps toward Kenjaku's ultimate goal, making the entire population of Japan merge with Tenjin. He started the game, but he's not the game master, so he can't change how it's played, at least not entirely. The technique he used brought back old threats and created new cursed technique users from regular people to join the game. Non-combatants were allowed to leave the colonies because, in the end, their lives wouldn't be spared anyway. Keep in mind, all these normal people would be fodder for the massive cursed spirit Kenjaku wants to create. Remember that guy Kashima? Well, he's brought back as promised. There's also Angel, who is inside of Hanakirusu, much like Sukuna and Yuji, and there's Yurazu, who reincarnates inside of Tsumiki's body. Then there are those who aren't fortunate enough to face off with Yuta Okatsu and a few others. Kenjaku takes over the Kamo clan, forcing our young Noritoshi out. Considering the blood manipulation technique he has, the cursed wombs are like ancestors to him and vastly more potent, since they don't have to worry about bleeding to death like a human would. With Gojo sealed and the Zenin clan destroyed by Maki, there aren't many people who can oppose Kenjaku and his role in the Jujutsu world. But Kenjaku inadvertently created a potentially more powerful version of Toji Zenin with his culling game colonies. After the chaos and devastation in Shibuya, Kenjaku heads to the USA to inform them about an untapped power source in Japan, cursed energy. However, he doesn't warn them about the dangers of curses. Apparently, he aims to create more cursed energy by having them participate in the games and be killed or take down sorcerers. The country agrees and sends 800 militants to kidnap as many Jujutsu users as possible since Gojo is already sealed and not considered a threat. But Kenjaku isn't creating chaos just for the sake of it. He wants to see what will happen if Tenjin and all of Japan create a massive cursed spirit and what it would look like. Similarly, Tenjin knows the ancient sorcerer and his way of thinking, preparing a means to free Gojo before they're confronted by Kenjaku, which throws a slight wrench in Kenjaku's lifetime goal. Because Tenjin didn't merge with Riko Amanai 12 years ago and evolved, they became closer to a curse. This makes Kenjaku's curse manipulation perfect to control the ancient immortal. However, there's a small issue to deal with first. Yuki and Choso are there to protect Tenjin. They do their best to stop Kenjaku, but they're no match for his experience and the multitude of curse techniques he's acquired over time. Kenjaku devastates Yuki with a tiny Uzumaki attack aimed at a lethal area, and she resorts to using a black hole against him. However, she ultimately fails and Choso is sent away to reunite with Yuji and the rest who oppose Kenjaku. The evil sorcerer finds Tenjin's true body and continues forward. However, Kenjaku can't begin the merger until the culling game is over because he took a binding vow beforehand, so that's another issue he has to deal with. He tries to overcome it by adding more rules, eventually glitching out the game master to force his success. But that's when Gojo is finally released. Kenjaku is notified at the exact moment and reveals the insane location he had left the prison room in hopes of slowing Gojo down or killing him. However, instead of Gojo, he's confronted by the man himself with a warning. Gojo's planning to get rid of Sukuna and Kenjaku on December 24th, the day Geto was killed in the past. Until the fight begins, Kenjaku is stuck by Sukuna's side because he knows he'll be instantly killed by Gojo, indicating he knows he's weaker than him. But at the same time, he knows that if Gojo loses, the rest of the Jujutsu users will go after Sukuna, so he's free to do as he pleases, which involves a lot of killing of the culling game players in the way of his merger. Seems like his patience is starting to run thin. Part of why the culling game is so important to Kenjaku is that he needs as much cursed energy buildup as possible. So it's only normal that when he asked the Kogame how many players died from refusing to fight, he's disappointed by the large number of deaths. 61 people died from forced curse technique removal. Kenjaku doesn't like Tenjin for never engaging physically or facing down a threat to reach a greater goal. But he has other worries like how much time he has before the Jujutsu sorcerers come after him after dealing with Sukuna. At least Gojo and Kashimo don't seem to be threats anymore. With that in mind, Kenjaku goes off to get rid of the players not following his orders. The first one happens to be an incarnated woman trying to escape. Kenjaku hunts her down and catches her, choking her with a curse and showing no remorse for what he's doing to someone he brought back to life. She's played her part, and now he just needs to amass enough cursed energy to combine with Tenjin and all of Japan. Another player, Hazenoki, shows up wondering how Kenjaku finds them so easily. It turns out the incarnated sorcerers are tagged with the cursed objects he used to bring them back, while awakened sorcerers have a seal on them that he can track. Either way, Kenjaku can find them anytime he wants to. But before that, he checks in on Meimei's livestream, glad to see that Gojo has lost. Even if someone other than Hazenoki wanted to come fight Kenjaku, he has arrangements in place already. He's the second best barrier user besides Tenjin and has hidden cursed spirits with barriers around him. In Shinjuku, they might not be very strong, but their job is to monitor any changes in cursed energy and movements. So if someone like Yuta Akatsu were headed towards Kenjaku, he would know immediately. Kenjaku also ensured he could see what the curses see, so he couldn't be taken by surprise by a player without cursed energy like Maki. But Kenjaku isn't saying all of that to prove how prepared he is. Instead, it's a way to make Hazenoki feel even more alone than before, especially since he refused to be Kenjaku's friend earlier. The fight begins with no warning as Kenjaku sends out curses against Hazenoki in a flash. If you recall, the incarnated sorcerer can remove parts of his body and use them as explosives, and he also has a reverse curse technique in his arsenal. But is that enough to escape this onslaught of attacks from Kenjaku? Sadly, no. Kenjaku has already stabbed Hazenoki in the neck and head, ensuring he can't heal that part of his body. Kenjaku is done with these sorcerers now and wants to move on to the next step, ending the culling game so the binding vow can be fulfilled. And to do that, all the players have to die as soon as possible. But there's one man, not an incarnated sorcerer, standing in Kenjaku's way next, Takaba the comedian. Despite all of his preparations, Kenjaku is visibly stunned by this man's sudden appearance out of nowhere. There is no hint that he was nearby, and Kenjaku received no notice from his curses placed around. Takaba is a mystery for Kenjaku, but because he's been given a curse technique and isn't an incarnated sorcerer, Kenjaku is not worried or even interested in him, except for one exception: Hiromi Higuruma and his judgment Shikigami. Regardless, because Kenjaku has no expectations for Takaba, he's entering this confrontation with a different mindset than usual. If it were Yuta Okotsu or Gojo coming his way, he'd be geared up to fight with everything he's got. What am I trying to say? Well, he's letting his guard down a bit, maybe because of the way Takaba confidently said that he arrived in the wrong place, which doesn't help. Aside from that, Kenjaku attacks the comedian anyway, expecting the large curse to end the fight with one attack. Instead, this just makes Takaba annoyed at Kenjaku's behavior and throws the pseudo-immortal into utter confusion. How could someone he thought had no potential survive that easily? The problem is that Kenjaku knows his attack was effective, but for some reason, it didn't work the way it was supposed to. And because Takaba has provided Kenjaku with one of the two things he always longed for, entertainment. He actually smiles a genuine smile, not the creepy one he had when Gojo figured out that he wasn't actually Geto. Although Kenjaku gets more serious, sending more curses after Takaba, his next attack has no effect either. All Takaba needs to do is make it funny for himself, and the damage is nullified. Not to mention, when Kenjaku goes for Takaba again, he ends up conjuring items from thin air, including a bandana for Kenny and cards for himself. This fact, more than anything else, has Kenjaku worried because Takaba can control whatever items he summons from his imagination. Kenjaku knows that he wouldn't be able to stop the effect, even with the millennia of years he's been alive. But this is Kenjaku we're talking about. He's not going to give up so easily, especially since all curse techniques we've seen have some kind of weakness. It's just a matter of time until he finds a way to take Takaba down. Interestingly, while Kenjaku is conversing with Takaba and trying to get a read on him, the comedian brings up the possibility of giving up the whole merging idea if something more entertaining crossed his path, and Kenjaku isn't opposed to the thought. So while Kenjaku is planning to kill Takaba and move on, the comedian is trying to find a way to end this interaction more peacefully. But seeing as Takaba's goal is laughter, Kenjaku has already figured out his comedic style and the lack of humor it would bring to an audience. In a way, Kenjaku's thorough analysis and review of Takaba's joke make the comedian start to doubt himself and think negatively. It allows Kenjaku to physically attack Takaba after breaking his confidence, and he's pleased with the blow he lands on the comedian. Takaba rejects Kenjaku's opinion since he's not a professional in his industry. But when Takaba suggests they have a staring contest, the ancient sorcerer just goes along with it and even wins with a surprisingly fun expression. It's another harsh blow to Takaba's ego, allowing Kenjaku to strike his body again. But when Kenjaku insists that Takaba should laugh while he sees Hazunoki's dead body lying on the ground, the situation shifts for Kenjaku. This moment of weakness seems like his chance to finish off Takaba. However, instead, the comedian startles him with an impressive bow as he apologizes. Of course, that's not his actual thoughts, but Takaba is controlling the way he thinks and the situation. Once again, another chance comes up for Kenjaku, though Takaba insists that he wants to make Kenjaku laugh no matter what. If he can't, then that would make him lose his confidence again, and Kenjaku would gain the upper hand. Right then, the special grade rebel spirit, Akira Ootake, enters the challenge. But it's no match for Truck Kun, or should I say Takaba driving a truck and pretending to be a drunk driver. This leads into a number of ridiculous sketches, like Takaba trying to bring a giant goldfish back to life and Kenjaku goofily shocking him with defibrillators, as well as the most musical game of rock, paper, scissors you'd expect to see in Jujutsu Kaisen. But the more this absurdity continues, the more Kenjaku understands what Takaba's curse technique is and how it works. He even figures out that it involves soul resonance, which explains why Kenjaku can't help but play along with whatever Takaba imagines. But instead of fighting Takaba or taking him down, he ends up joining in, possibly of his own choice. Eventually, you can only fight against someone's carefree fun for so long. Even when he tries to drown Takaba in the water, it turns into Fanta, and Kenjaku looks so young and filled with joy. Deep down, he feels that he's going to lose if this continues. Instead of allowing Takaba to continue this farce and forcing him into continuous jokes, Kenjaku brings them into something more serious, a live performance on stage. As much as Kenjaku wants to demolish Takaba's mind and break out of the control he's holding, that's not what makes things start to fall apart. It's the fact that Takaba is enjoying this performance so much. But as the performance comes to an end and they come out of that imaginary world, Takaba is lying down in white clothing, dressed like someone who's passed on. Kenjaku has to admit that he has laughed because of the comedian, and seconds later, Yuta's behind him. It's too late for Kenjaku to react the way he had planned with all his barriers and curses and fail-safes. He tries to use anti-gravity against Yuta, but it's too late. Takaba's distraction has succeeded long enough to get the ancient sorcerer's head cut off with one clean slice. As much as it seems like this is the end of Kenjaku, him saying that his will shall be carried on kind of leaves us with a bad taste in our mouth. Will Kenjaku just switch bodies again? Is this not the real him, but just a part of his curse technique? There's so much that can happen since Kenjaku's got a collection of curse techniques. He probably has some we've never seen him use. But for now, it seems like the culling game is over. And if Kenjaku comes back, we might not recognize him right away. After Kenjaku's death, everyone is left to start planning on how to handle the rest as they have more unfinished work to do. Even after Kenjaku's death, his horror continues to run through each sorcerer's mind as they continue fighting against the cursed spirits. The whole demon-infested land is yet to be conquered, and let's not forget that annoying Sukuna who is constantly berating everyone in Megumi's body. But that will be another subject to be talked about in another day. That's pretty much it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts about this in the comments, and if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like and consider subscribing if you haven't already. Also guys, we have already announced how you can be a part of our channel in the previous video. Hope you check it out in the end. So have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.